everybody. Welcome to the Just Like Bruddas podcast. I am Kai Jones, owner of WJG Sports. To my left is, who are you again?
Leica Abibi, also known as Kai Jones to some people.
Right. And then, of course, on my far left, we have a very special guest, J. Mike Blake. He is a very nice teacher at Cardinal Gibbons.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and he's used to, do some media or whatnot, at the NNO, small paper.
Right.
Yeah, somewhere, over there in that side of the state. For how long was it?
10 years with that company.
Nice.
Carry news included, because they were on news.
Right.
So nice 10-year run.
Right, of course. Now he is a teacher who also freelances for high school OT. Is there any other things that we got to add here to your resume real quick?
I think that's it. I mean, that's all I'm doing these days.
Okay.
Teaching and writing a little bit here and there on the side.
Okay.
But yeah, seriously, thank you for joining us today, man.
No problem. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's a good rainy, wet Wednesday. A lot of soccer games canceled. So he decided to come on down after he finished proctoring the PSAT. This is your second year of proctoring, right?
Yeah, second year. So it was a lot better, more prepared for the proctoring this year than I was last year for sure. But a little half day, so why not make the trip down to Goldsboro?
Right. So what was it like, transitioning from the newspaper world to the classroom, really?
It was kind of wild. I've gone from doing something for 10 years and really being a perfectionist at it, go into a new field where you don't know what's the right thing to do here. I asked a ton of questions to a number of people, whether coworkers or administrators. So I had a great support just at Cardinal Gibbons. There's a number of people I could go to with things. Because there were some mornings where I wasn't entirely sure what we're doing that day until it was in the morning shower and something hit me. And so last year I was probably one of the first teachers at school. I was one of the last ones to leave because I was doing so much work creating these assignments. But being able, some things did transition well. Being able to kind of relate to the high schooler, which I was doing, covering high school sports,
Right.
served me well. Being able to kind of, and there was something I picked up on because my mother was a teacher. So just a few things about classroom management, things like that. Also, it helps classroom management wise, discipline wise. I'm a parent, I'm a dad of 3 kids. So that part, coming out of college, I think that's probably a weird thing to adjust to, is telling someone else what to do, and I'm very used to telling kids no. Because we got 3 little ones. And then just, editing and getting to the academic writing style was just, I had to flip a switch there, but and I actually had to reread some of these books. I'm teaching American literature, I had to kind of familiarize myself with them as we went along, because I haven't read some of these in 15 years. And so year 2 now is a lot faster. I don't have to get there as early, leave as late. I've kind of got everything in place now, but it's been very fulfilling. I'm really glad about the change.
How is it, working with high school OT, which is, of course, the beast of North Carolina when it comes to covering high school sports?
It's been great. Nick Stevens he opened the door for me to contribute right away. My retirement from high school sports media was very short-lived. I think I was retired for a week and a half, and then I was with high school OT, which actually I helped. People don't realize this. I was one of the first people there 10 years ago or 12 years ago, because I was right out of college, and they only had 4 part-timers, and I was covering one of the conferences. So when it first launched, I was actually there. And so it's coming back now, this many years later, it's changed drastically, the scope and what they're able to do. But he gives me a lot of flexibility. Nick gives me a lot of flexibility. I can kind of write, find stories that I'm somewhat aware of, or I think would be kind of neat. And so last year, I was able to just kind of find things here and there. Still can contribute, especially playoff time, but I'm not necessarily on that daily grind like I was last year, or was 10 years before that. And then also kind of be able to give my input on different things that we can do at high school OT that have worked for me at NNO or other places, or just things that I see. And they have the wherewithal, they have the resources to be able to pull off some of it, which is really cool.
In relation to high school OT, of course, it started as entity of the Triangle, covered high school sports in the Triangle, but there's been expansion over the last year or so. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I guess a few years ago they kind of just basically took their TV market. They went from Triangle, which is easier to kind of cover, to their viewing area at WRAL, which includes Fayetteville, like Roanoke Rapids, things like that. And then they expanded to the entire East. And right now we have a very very good staff. It's they've made some trips down east.
Absolutely.
Jordan Hadding was just at Wallace Rhodes Hill. Joel Bryant lives in Greenville, goes to school at ECU, so he's able to go to Eastern.
A lot.
Yeah. And then it was just kind of from projections and things like that. You started seeing like, well, would it make sense if you were able to have someone, a part-time person who's out there in Charlotte area or in the Triad area, to just incorporate that as well. And so far it's been, I think it's exceeded expectations and how well it's been received. A lot of people, you're not going to be high school T the same way you are in the Triangle in year one. There's a lot of communities to learn, a lot of relationships to establish. But it was just like, if you're an online website, this has been my philosophy when I was at NO. If you view yourself as an online website, eventually you cast as wide of a net as is realistic, right? Like before I took over at NO, there was this idea of like, well, if they don't buy enough subscriptions, they're not really in your coverage area. And so parts of counties were covered, but not others. And then this, was, or maybe not this county, even though they're right on the edge. And one of the first things I did was open it up. I think I added like 6 counties to our coverage area when I was there. And then it's kind of a similar thing here, right? If they're coming to your website, especially when you're covering state championships, you're doing projections, why wouldn't they also come to your website more often throughout the year if you were covering things in their backyard?
Absolutely.
And so, the reaction has been really cool. And I've made it out to one trip in the Triad already with going to Reagan. It was the weekend.
Not near my house.
Yeah. So it was a rainy day, or I think it was maybe when the hurricane was knocking out a lot of games in the East. So we all just kind of went to the West and found some really cool games, which is nice to have that option as well.
Absolutely.
Right. The thing I think about, I kind of try to shape what I do at WJG Sports, kind of how you guys do some of the stuff at High School T, and kind of that philosophy as well, because, if you look at my YouTube, there's Tarboro highlights, Kinston highlights, South Central highlights. I kind of keep the website more towards the actual WJG part, but the YouTube and the video part can kind of go wherever just because of how content doesn't die online versus how it dies on a newspaper.
It's a good way to think of it. And it's just, it's one of those things I used to, when I was high school sports editor at NO, I would say, like, I've never had a reader contact me and say, hey, could you cover less? Like, could you like, cut back on showing up here so often? Or could you not include us in those rankings, or all East team or whatever you're doing? And all West team now I guess we have both at High School T. I've always heard it's been the opposite of that, right? So, we run into some coaches in the playoffs. They're right, like for instance, used to not cover Wayne County. There was a movement to kind of cut the NO area back, and then I came in. I was like, CBA Cox right there. Like, why Wilson's right there? These are coaches that are asking us every year, like, hey, when is the NO going to come back and cover? So why not do that? It's the same thing. Like, if you obviously provide the content, then they're going. It's not like high schoolers aren't going to look at it. And I looked at it that way from competition. I used to compete against it when I was NO and High School T are both right there stationed in the Triangle. So we're battling for breaking news and things like that. But at the end of the day, if I cover a game and they cover a game, the athlete's going to click on both. Like, they're not going to pick one or the other. They're going to go.
They want to see. They want to see themselves.
They want to see themselves. They see what you wrote. How did you word it? They want the full coverage. So at the end of the day, just provide as much as you can.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that's pretty interesting about high school sports. It's not necessarily about who it is as much as it is what it is. Mm-hmm. So just kind of, I think people traffic more towards what they want to see and not just who, versus I think a lot of times when you look at pro and college leagues, a lot of times I think you get people who figure out which writer they want to go to for the source of news.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it too. Like, especially this time, like, I think Nick has done this for maybe about as long as I have, 12 years or so, and we're the old heads in the room. So no one's been in the game long enough to really have that following the way you do with pro writers. And that's kind of the fun thing on high school sports,
Right.
is that your audience could turn over basically in 4 years.
Right.
Almost all, except for coaches and ADs, you can have a completely new readers. That's the challenge of it. Every year I would go into August and get emails from people saying, hey, my daughter's on varsity this year. I hope you guys cover volleyball. And I'm thinking has anyone covered volleyball more than me in the last year? But I'm wait a minute, I have to be patient because they weren't reading me last year. They're going to be a reader this year. And you have, they weren't following the writer. They're just following about what they want to see. Now their kids on varsity. Now you are going to provide the content they want to see.
Right.
And you have to be mindful of that and just keep, prove yourself over and over again because
Right.
you've got a new readership.
Right. Of course, not getting too much more into about the industry because I'm sure we could talk for
we
a
can talk
long time about industry and kind of how things are going. But one of the things that's interesting about high school OT for you that you've kind of talked about is the availability to write, longer form pieces about things that you think are interesting. One that you have already started working on and that we've talked about before and that you said is about to run soon is the Spring Creek Going Independent.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a little bit about it last week with Jones Senior having to dissolve their football team So how do you feel about independence in the NCHSAA? Is it a problem? Is it not? What do you think?
I don't see it as a problem. They wouldn't have this outlet for you to classify as independent if they weren't okay with it. The only thing is, if you were allowed, the only trade-off it is you have to forfeit if you can't play in the playoffs, which I think in Spring Creek's case, they're okay with. If Joel Senior wants to do that next year, they should be okay with it too. That's just because if it were easy to make the playoffs as independent, wouldn't we all go independent? Wouldn't
Right.
everybody? That would be so there has to be some give and take there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was actually the last time I heard about teams going independent was years ago. J.H. Rose was in a conference with New Bern and then 4 Wilmington schools.
Yes, I remember that.
And their travel budget was, every year they were just bleeding money because they were driving down for tennis matches and everything. No matter how much gate money you're getting, you're going that far to Wilmington for 4 road trips. And the association told them, hey, you can go independent in everything but football if you want to. But then they couldn't make the playoffs. So they were like, what's the point of that? So that's the only time I've heard that option being out there, but it's been out there for a while.
Right.
I think in Spring Creek's case, they've found it to be very beneficial. They haven't, I know they're only got 1 win thus far.
Right.
They're closing the season with a winnable stretch.
But much more, they've been in games though.
That's the main
They've
thing.
been competitive a lot. I know the scores don't say it, but they really have.
If you look at last year, they had a 4-game stretch. When this conference was put together, Spring Creek is barely above the 2A cutoff line.
Yes.
People were saying, oh my gosh, poor Spring Creek, because now they got Clinton, East Duplin, Wallace, Rose Hill, and James Keenan. And sure enough, last year they had those 4 back to back and scored 0 points in those 4 games. And
Right.
for a month of the season, they scored 0 points.
Right.
And
Nobody wants to come out and see that.
what can you do as a coach?
Yeah.
You can't call timeout and tell them anything they're going to be able to use. At a certain point, it's well, guys, I wish we were 100 pounds stronger, and it's too late to well, I guess go out there and push harder. It's not going to work either.
Yeah.
When you play teams that are competitive and about the same as you're coaching all throughout that game. You're instructing. You've got things that you can point out to make them better. I think Spring Creek over these next 2 years, because it's a 2-year commitment to go independent, that they'll be a better football program because of it. Because, and again, coaches want that. Coaches want to be able to call a timeout, not to say, pick your heads up, I know it's tough, I know we're down 50. They want to be able to call a timeout 4th quarter and say, okay, this is 3rd and long, here's what we're going to do. You enjoy that. That's what
in like a 1-score game.
Yeah. That's what every athlete I think wants to. They want to be in those tense environments. So I think it's a good thing that Spring Creek did it. It's hopefully it jumpstarts things in the future. But it'll be tough in that conference too. So that's kind of the thing they have.
Playing those Duplin County schools, especially Wallace, Rose Hill.
Yeah, if they are still, because they're barely 2A, if they're stuck in that conference for football, it's still going to be very tough going forward. But you got to kind of make a change. You got to try something different if you tried it this long, as Spring Creek has, without success.
Do you think that we will see more schools go independent, or do you think that maybe Spring Creek is kind of the outlier here?
I think it's possible, certainly. I don't know anything about Jones Senior. I haven't talked to anyone over there, but why wouldn't they? But not only because of the competitive factor, but the travel. Like, you get to travel, you get to draw up your 11 games, and you're dropping Tarboro altogether. You're dropping, maybe you're dropping Riverside altogether. Then obviously, maybe you could pick up some smaller, teams closer to you. Maybe pick up Arendelle Parrott.
They've played 11-man games over the last couple of years.
Beargrass Charter, you can do more things like that, because right now their conference is big, so they don't have much non-conference choices.
Right, especially like the 1A teams up in the Northeast, like the Atlantic 5 conference, doesn't really have teams that are playing football right now.
Yeah, and so that could be something that could be helpful for them. I think we may see a little bit more of it, especially because right now the tough thing that's been presented to coaches and ADs, it gets about August, and all off season you've only had 30 kids coming to workouts. You're making a call in August. Okay, we may have to go JV only this year. We may have to go maybe we'll do varsity. Maybe we'll do varsity, but cross your fingers and hope no one gets hurt. Why not? If you can see this coming off years in advance, and Spring Creek saw it coming like immediately after their last season ended. You can say, let's go independent. That way we're still playing 11-man football. We're still playing on Friday nights, and we have a little flexibility in how we can kind of bring the program back rather than just shutting it down last minute on everybody. So I think I suggested last year that maybe the High School Athletic Association look into 8-man football, especially with the growth of charter schools, that they're never going to be able to have numbers for 11-man, but 8-man could be doable. If you have 25 people in your roster for 11-man football,
that's
you're
a deep roster.
It's a deep roster in 8-man, and you are in very big trouble in 11-man. So there's a huge difference there.
Yeah.
But I think that's a conversation that, like, who starts it then? Do football coaches start it? Like, do no one? That's a harder thing to go strictly jump from A to B. Everyone's going from A to C. Maybe B is going independent. That's the next step, and we can see a little bit more of that, because they're not Jones and. Is not the only school. We've seen schools shut it down. Mattasquite. So there's no.
Hyde County.
Yeah, there's 2 counties that don't have football. Cape Hatteras has shut it down in recent years. There's a school in Monroe, Central Academy, that shut it down. Chapel Hill, Cedar Ridge have both, and Carborough and East Chapel Hill have all shut it down in recent years, or at least forfeited games because they weren't healthy. I think Carborough may have avoided forfeiting an entire season.
Didn't East Columbus do that recently?
East Columbus forfeited a game. I don't know if they're done for the entire season, but they're right on the line. And they are in a tough position because there's no one really around them, but they kind of have to play some of those very good programs and that are
like Red Springs is good.
They have no non-conference schedule because they're in a 9-team league. So they basically have 2 non-conference games, and then they're thrown to the wolves.
Correct. Yeah.
So that could be something I think that we might see a little bit of. Maybe me writing this story and kind of detailing how they did it. Maybe other ADs see it and they're like, hey, why don't we try this for the next 2 years instead of getting right up to the start of the season, and then we can't do anything, which every opponent for Spring Creek found an extra game. When you forfeit the season, or you say we can't play on August 10th, you just cost all your conference teams and a lot of your non-conference opponents a home gate. Yeah. They can't afford to lose because no one's making more money these days in high school athletics. Right. Budgets are getting tighter and tighter. So this is better, I think.
Right. Now, of course, something that could help Spring Creek, and has kind of been lingering over everyone's heads for the past year or so now, with the Athletic Association adding on a 4AA, is realignment. Mm-hmm. How do you think? What is your opinion on realignment? What do you think the association is leaning towards with this new 4A?
There's no doubt they're leaning towards 5A. So the only reason it's called 4AA now is because the bylaws, which is kind of like your constitution, say you have to have 4 classes. They're going to change it. It just takes a process to change it. So right now they couldn't announce, hey, we're going to 5 classes, and announce that knowing that it's incompatible with their bylaws.
Right.
So they have to say, we're looking at maybe splitting 4A, and then go to the bylaws, change it. I hope it does. I hope whatever it does, it gives them some flexibility. Whether it's they can choose 5 or maybe 6 or maybe 7. Like I think the best thing would be more flexibility there with realignment to start off with. But yeah, if you ask me which way I think they'll go, I think they'll go to 5 classes.
Okay.
I prefer maybe going to more. Just for me, I have a lot of opinions on realignment in particular. I've kind of given a lot of thought over the years.
How do you feel about how they currently do it now? Because a lot of people don't know it's the bottom 20% is 1A, the top 20% is 4A, and then the 30% is split between 2 and 3A. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like it should be equal across when they do go to 5 classes? So 20, 20, 20, or
I think it depends. So the way it worked out last time, 20, 30, 30, 20. Actually, this is the best realignment I've ever seen. It's the only area that really got screwed was Guilford and Rockingham counties because you had 2 5-team leagues there. Yeah, but if I'm looking at it, I would like more classifications to make then you can make them equal sized. And the first thing I think realignment just it's got its hands into too many things. It affects too much of what we do in high school athletics. Number one, it takes too long. Like, next year will be our last year of this realignment using numbers from 6 years earlier. Like, so much has changed. Yeah. Number one, we got to speed that up. Like 2-year alignments. Because you get a new conference, year 1, you kind of get used to everyone. Year 2, you're like, okay, I know who my conference is now. Year 3, you start doing the realignment process, so everyone's talking about the next conference, so you don't even enjoy this one you have. And then year 4 is a lame duck year. So it just feels weird to me that you're never enjoying the conference you're in. I think it affects conference affiliation too much. I like split conferences. I think we should have more of them. I don't think it should affect your playoff representation as much as it does right now. But if you make the classes smaller, then there's less of that barrier in the way. Teams should play their neighbor. Teams should play their rivals. Teams should not say, we're not in the same conference because we're 100 students different and you happen to be on one side of the line and I'm on the other. Like Spring Creek. Spring Creek's numbers didn't go up. The line moved. Yeah. Spring Creek should still be playing Rosewood. Like, they are not that far different numbers-wise than they ever were from Rosewood.
That's like right over here. Right?
Yeah. Play your neighbor. Because here's the thing. In 1960s, we were doing realignment the same way we are now. There was only 10, 12 athletic programs, mouths to feed. You had boys and girls basketball, maybe boys and girls JV basketball, JV football, varsity football, track, baseball. Like, you didn't have a whole lot. Now you could be in a rural school and be sitting there with varsity boys and girls tennis, boys and girls soccer, boys and girls basketball, plus their JVs, football, JV football, wrestling, on and on it goes. And I think if you did volleyball, varsity and JV, it doesn't take much. Yeah. You don't have to be a big school to have 22 athletic programs. I'm talking not even lacrosse. I'm not even talking about swimming. Not even talking about golf. Mm-hmm. It really doesn't take much to have that many athletic programs. So we need to do something to help out these teams. The eye-opener for me was this last realignment. The Central Carolina 2A has 10 teams. Yep. 8 of them are in Davidson County. Yep. For the first time, they have 8 in the same county, and they're all playing each other. Travel goes down. The expenses for travel go down. The ticket sales go up. Everyone's kind of happy. If you took away the impact, if those teams should be in the same conference, even if one of them happens to be 3A next time. Why wouldn't you? Well, it works out so well. The only reason you wouldn't is you say, well, I think it's going to hurt my playoff seeding or hurt my playoff chances. We just kind of do something, and that's why I think smaller classes are the answer. Because then it's like, well, if almost all of us are going to make the playoffs, then let's just play our regular season out against teams that we know and teams that we hate. Play our neighbors.
Play rivals. Right. I mean, I know rivals are.
Which is I think Wayne County is an interesting place just because you have the 3A schools, which Eastern Wayne is now a 2A school.
Yeah,
inside
size-wise.
Spring Creek and Goldsboro 2A, and then you have Rosewood sitting right there as the 1A, who kind of goes to Princeton more, and then Princeton and North Johnson kind of get sectioned off from Johnston County. Yeah. So then it's kind of like you don't really get a chance to play throughout the county anymore just because you're too small.
Right.
Technically.
And I mean, you know, that's so other states kind of do that where they give they like tell the schools, pick whatever conferences you want, but here's our playoff procedure, and it's really not going to your conference. Your conference champions will make the playoffs first or what have you, but there's not so much attached to it. So if you go to a realignment process, no matter how many classifications, number one, it needs to be sped up. Number two, it needs to not affect conferences as much as it does right now, and then maybe number three. Also, your conferences shouldn't affect your playoff standing as much as it is right. Think about the NCISAA.
Right.
Tons of split conferences because you're trying to get the travel down, and teams kind of know like, hey, if we finish fourth in this league or we finish fifth, it's not really going to affect our playoff standing as much as it, like getting left out. We know we have to hit certain benchmarks in order to make the playoffs.
Right.
And we're comfortable being in this league, even if that team is bigger than us. We're comfortable being in it and playing in it.
Right.
There's a good example of that I kind of could take from that.
Right.
Looking at the soccer playoff, the boys soccer playoff seedings from this that just came out this past weekend. Westchester Country Days, of course, the school I went to high school at, got the 1 seed in the 2A state playoffs. They play in the Piedmont Triad Athletic Conference that has all 3A and 4A schools. So that's kind of an example I could draw from what he's saying. So a little bit of
versus the Wayne Country Day, who's a 2A and 1A split.
Yeah,
and they play mostly those 2A and those 1A schools, and they went undefeated against them.
Yeah,
but
their seeding was only number 3 for some reason. So
right.
I can see smaller schools saying, well, yeah, I know those are my rivals, but why would if I play them and lose to all of them, that means I'm going to miss my 1A playoffs. And so I think that's the next thing you have to remove. However you need to do that. There are other ways other states do it, but I think for the health of high school sports, you got to help these athletic departments. They have, again, it doesn't take much adding up to do to get to 20 to 22 at JV or varsity athletic programs. Most schools have that, even in the country.
Yep.
And say we need to do some healthy athletic departments. So pick your own conferences, play your rivals, and then it will not affect your playoff standing as much as it does right now. Where it's like, hey, if you finish second or you finish third, like that could be the difference between you getting in or out.
And of course, rivalry games will always help the gate.
Absolutely. And later in the year, the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. I think that's an interesting thing when you talk about split conferences too. I mean, because the one thing I think is interesting is when you have those teams who are like in the 3A, 4A, and they play all the 4A schools and they lose all the 4A schools, but they get into the 3A because they're the top 3A team in their conference.
Yeah.
So how do you think that plays into it as well?
Yeah, so that's where I think the more divisions you have, the better. Because if you get to a point where basically most teams are in the playoffs off the bat, then you're only leaving out like your winless teams or your teams that really don't want any part of the playoffs. So that's where I think it benefits you to have it more like that rather than like 2A and 3A are now, where there are going to be some pretty good teams that get left out just because it's 110 of them trying to fit into 64 spots. It's really tough, even using Max Prep rankings, to say, hey, that team had a better season than you. That's an objective way to do it, but is it the best way? Right. Or is it a better way to kind of let teams get an easier entry into the playoffs and then see what happens after it? That's how I look at it. But I think split conferences have a big negative connotation in part because of what we've seen in this area. Where Southern Wayne, I remember years ago, Southern Wayne went 0-18 in volleyball, but because of the automatic bid rule, everyone in that half of the split was going to get an automatic bid anyway. So Southern Wayne was hosting a first round volleyball playoff game at 0-18, hosting in the 3A playoffs.
Yeah, I remember Southern Nash, the girls soccer team, they in the spring
they got left
with
out,
8 wins, and a team from Wilmington had, I think, 0 wins, and they got in soccer.
Yeah. All you need in Wilmington, Max Prep seems to love those teams down there. All you need is like 2 or 3 wins, and you're going to be in the playoffs. So that's, you get into the little things like that, it gets a little uncomfortable, right? Like, why don't we? It seems like we're needlessly kind of making that part difficult for us. With split conferences now, there's a few stipulations like, hey, you have to finish top 3, you have to have a winning record to be seeded as a 1, to be seeded as a 2. If you do some more tweaking to that, that's going in the right direction, I think. So where okay, let's say you are, but again, let's say you're in a conference and you get kind of beat up by the higher ranked teams, you're still making playoffs with good standing, as long as you didn't just bomb against them and you haven't beat anybody. But again, if you choose your own conference, which we go back, if you're able to choose your own conference, Southern Wayne, Eastern Wayne, they're not choosing Greenville schools. So they are not.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They're going to turn to their west and say, hey, Goldsboro, hey, Spring Creek, CBA Kai. Like, what about us? Maybe we get Kinston and North Lenore, South Lenore in here. Maybe we get Green Central here.
I'd be down for that.
I'm cool with that. If that's like an Eastern Carolina 2A3.
That's exactly what they would do, right? And it would be more competitive. You say, wow, but Southern Wayne is the largest school. Like, is Southern Wayne going to blow everyone out in every sport? No. So everyone should be kind of okay with that.
Kinston and Goldsboro like 30 minutes from each other.
And then, as long as I think your goal should be either conferences be really small or they be super big and you have divisions, which you're allowed to do. People don't do it for whatever reason, but you're allowed to have like East and West. I've only seen it once in lacrosse. There was a 10-team lacrosse team, so they split them up 5 and 5 and used last year's rankings or standings to pair them up. So there was like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I would love that for like football. Like, say if we kept that Green Central, Monroe County, Wayne County.
Yeah.
Let's say we keep all of those together,
Yeah.
and you have this big. I think that would be 9 teams.
Yeah.
You have 9 teams together, and you split them up into conferences 4 or 5. So you get your conference, and you get either 1 or 2 of the other side.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that would be awesome.
You're allowed to do that. People don't, because I think it creates a lot of work for ADs.
Right.
It's true.
Especially if you're going to do different divisions, different sports. But it's one of those things where I think it makes it a little bit more fair. And like you want to be able to have a big conference, or that if it's close enough geographically, but you also want to be able to have flexibility in non-conference. So you don't want. That's why teams don't try to get 12 of them together or 14 of them together. And but I think, like, why not? I'm all about realignment being less of this huge thing that hangs over all of high school sports, and we get back to
basically it's been hanging over our heads for about 2 years.
And I don't like that. I mean, it does great for numbers, right? I used to write something about realignment, you would get 5,000 hits like that. But if it needs to have a less of an impact on everything, it's this oversized impact. Let's get back to rivalries. Let's get back to playing your neighbor. Let's get back to like worrying about what this does for playoffs. Let's get that burden out of the way, because this is what's going to help our schools the most.
Last thing I want to ask you too is playoffs. Do you think that there needs to be a human element at all, or are you fine with no human element in it right now?
The only human element, if you could figure out a way to stop the conference rematches, that's what I'm for. Like, I don't think, because here's the deal.
Absolutely.
Predetermined brackets, I didn't like them, right? Didn't like them. You had one side of the bracket to be super tough, and then, for instance, I think there was a number of years there with Kinston's boys basketball team, the easiest game they would have is like 3rd round. They'd play like Croatan or something like that. So maybe they'd be on the road. If you do win-loss percentage, they might even be on the road. It's a lot of teams that were on the road for wrong reasons. They use conference seeding priority, which is a random list, which made no sense. So at least we do home and away better. But it created this new problem that was almost made it worse than the original version. Not worse to me, but I think it created a new problem that needed to be addressed that still hasn't. How do you do that? I don't know if the right answer. I think if you could somehow map out a way where no one in the first round is going to play each other in their own conference. I don't know how you do that. If your human element is just to skip you to the next matchup, or we used to reseed teams in basketball after 3 rounds. You reseed them. So if you had 2 teams, like number 1, number 2 in the conference, were about to meet in the regional semifinals, they would be swapped. Like maybe we should reseed like we used to, but after 2 rounds or something. I don't know. But that's the one thing I would like to do, because it is a legit complaint for any coach that says, why am I playing this team 2 times a year and then running into them in the first round, and if I beat that team, I'm running into another team.
Exactly.
At a certain point, you got to be okay with rematches, right? Maybe your conference is just good.
Yeah.
But first round, I feel like we can do something there to try to alleviate that.
Right.
Yeah, that happened a lot in the baseball and softball playoffs this past year.
And, it's the good conferences, right? Like,
Yeah,
they always seem to be the ones that matchup wise they play each other. It's like the seeding way we use now. If you're the number 1 overall seed, you might have the toughest path because chances are there's 8 conferences in your half. So that means the number 1, the best 2 seed is 9. That means you got to play them in the 3rd round. The best wild card team is like 16 or 17. That means you got to play them in the 2nd round. Yeah, so like the 1 seed actually gets a lopsided bracket now that they have
versus the 2 seed, 8 or 10.
Right. You're playing.
Because once you get past those 10 or 11 teams, you're normally not getting those elite teams who can probably make a run.
Yeah, like the top. But I've seen it a few times now, and it's not all the time, but especially in like 4A, where there's a little bit more parity with those conferences. Like that top wild card team could take down the number 2 or number 1 overall, but they're playing them in like the 2nd round instead of being a little bit more spaced out. So that's the other thing. I don't know, maybe that's being a little too picky there, but I think as long as you fix the conference rematch problem, I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
All right, of course, now we got to get into game of the weeks real quick. Striker, what is your game of the week here?
I'll go Arendelle Parrott versus Fayetteville Christian. Another 8-man matchup. Parrott's the top team in the Division I 8-man standings, 5-0, undefeated. It's their senior night for some really special players, including Trey McLaughlin, running back.
Yeah,
he's been
big time baseball. And
absolutely. If they win, they should all but secure the top seed and play a semifinal in Kinston on November 1st. I'm going with the Patriots on senior night. What you got?
Mine is going to be just a little old rivalry game.
Speaking of Kinston,
Green Central Kinston. I think it's one of the best. You might can chime in on this, one of the best rivalries in the eastern part of North Carolina right now, just because of how it was worked out for basketball and football. Both of those schools kind of in an interesting place where both of them share. Because one of the things that's interesting to me now is when I look back at this, Green Central was always such a small school. Kinston never played Green Central.
Yeah,
there was never history. Yeah, because Kinston used to be a 4A, 3A school. Now it's down to a 2A school. Now these schools, they play regularly in the same conference. And these kids, they grow up right down the street from each other. They know each other now because they play each other so often.
That game's a real toss-up this week. Especially with the status of Dimitri Holmes up. I don't know if it's like up in the air or what's going on. It's just they've had a little.
He's been great when he's been in, but
absolutely. But of course, Green Central, they want to play spoiler.
Yeah.
Could be a signature win for Jay Wilson. If they can get it.
Yeah. Of course, game picks are presented by We Up Athletic Group, and we will have those coming to you soon. J. Mike, man, appreciate you coming on down to Goldsboro and showing us some love and talking to us about the NCHSA and some bigger issues. Last question here for you. Which coach is probably the best after post game that you've ever dealt with?
That I've ever dealt with. Best coach. I might have to, this is the first one that comes to my head is former Garner boys basketball coach Eddie Gray. Just because there's no telling where the interview would kind of dovetail into. I actually changed a few things about the way we used to do stories because I realized he was giving me so much information that I couldn't fit it all in my game story. So I needed to do something different in order to get these stories in there. Because he would write, sometimes he's a history teacher, so he'd talk about like some war that happened. I'm like, oh my gosh, like that quote doesn't really fit into this game, but I need to use it somehow. Or he would just be blunt, or he'd tell you about like, this kid, he's like, this kid didn't used to do the right things, but now he is. Like there was a candidness that his players appreciated. It always came through in the post game, and so for me, I only got to interview him a few times because I hadn't fully gotten to be a high school sports editor until his later years, but. It was always fun. Like I said, he's the one who actually changed the way we did it. Like I was like, okay, how about you just do this much on the game and then this much on winning team and losing team? That way you can take these nuggets that you get from him and use it in some way.
That's a great choice. I like that.
All right. Who's the funniest? Probably coach. Who's the funniest? After they give you those great coach speaks that you could expect.
Oh man, gosh, I can't necessarily. There's always somebody that I would joke around with. I can't really think of. Eddie was pretty funny. Coach Gray was really funny. So I'll leave it. I'll leave it on that note.
Okay. Okay.
That's a good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Leica, you got anything else to say, man?
Once again, J. Mike, thank you for coming. Thank you for making the trip to see us. I think this was a good show.
Yeah,
I know I didn't get to say much, but
Hey, did I talk too much?
You're the guest, man.
I was like, you're the guest, you know more than we do, and I think it's interesting to take a look through your eyes who've seen a lot more than we have at the high school landscape and how it kind of is, where it's going and kind of where it could go as well.
Absolutely.
So I think it was a great time. We didn't say episode 15 down in the books.
15 down already.
Yeah,
Look at you guys.
Yeah.
It's really cool. It's really cool.
We appreciate it.
You guys are doing great work.
Yeah, we appreciate it. We're rolling through football season now. Week 9, girls tennis came out. Playoffs are now out. We got volleyballs next week.
Volleyball's coming right up. It starts on a Saturday, so get to as many games you can. They usually stagger those starts for you.
Volleyball, soccer, football in 3 weeks.
There are some.
Football. Wow, that stuck up.
There are some conference tournaments in some.
Fall is almost over, and we are soon going to be hitting the.
It just got cool. How can fall sports season be over? It's just now got under 90 degrees.
Shout out North Carolina weather.
Yeah, right. No, it's going to be a fun stuff. And like I said, you guys do it great. And if you guys see any of my photos from high school at T, it's all Kai. Kai taught me how to use a camera, and they and now they turn out pretty good.
Right in the 7th spring.
The James Keenan field was so dark, but those were my best photos because I was using everything you taught me.
Hey.
Like I said, these are 2 really good influences on me. So I'm still learning, and I learn a lot from him, So yeah. But
it's always good to learn.
But thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week. Actually, we'll be back Saturday for Rapid Reaction.
Yep.
We'll see you next time. Peace out.